for example, Genie with Bon Iver on my album, that was basically just like we threw like so much stuff at, just one idea. And so much of actually forming that song and that production was just going in, muting stuff, deleting, regions here and there, and really just kind of honing in on like what was like the pure, basically just saying like how little can I get away with.
Welcome to Audio Technology Magazine's ISO Booth podcast, where we phone audio engineers and producers at home, and thanks to the pandemic lockdown, they answer.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Audio Technology ISO Booth podcast. Today it's a real privilege to have Jimmy Stack, producer extraordinaire, joining us all the way from LA. Jimmy, thank you so much for making the time to catch up with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I've just been gracing my ears with a morning full of tunes from your new album, Ephemera, released October 30th. Amazing production,
yes,
really digging it. Some awesome sounds coming out as well. It's really a work of art. So well done on getting that out, and it's really awesome stuff. So I guess what I'm really keen to hear from you about is, your production workflow, how you go about creating these sounds. So do you want to just kind of talk us through, how you'd approach creating a song, even if you want to talk about one of the songs from the album? But, how do you start, like from the ground up, the building blocks of a song?
Well, I think, for the longest time, maybe up until, honestly, 2 years ago, I think I was really searching for just that, what is that one way you do stuff, that kind of formula that gets you in your zone, gets you, saying stuff in your voice, and just you doing you to the best of your abilities. And I think what I ended up learning is that at least for me, like that doesn't really work. The one way of doing stuff. And so what I've found for me is basically each and every one of these songs is all started in a completely different way. And that's honestly the way when I'm working with other people too on their music, it's it goes similarly, but so just to give you like an idea of the range of possibilities, sometimes I love doing drum programming and stuff. Like I'm just a total like nerd for that, and being just like super specific and picky about, sounds and, how I mix the drums and all that, like almost to a fault. But sometimes I'll like start there, spend way too long programming a 1 bar, maybe 2 bar loop. And then, we'll kind of like, maybe I'll build the music from there, or maybe like I'll be working with a friend who's a player, like a bassist or a keyboard player, or, a guitarist. And then things just, there's kind of that little musical idea that starts where, we're just like, there's some rhythm coming from the drums, and then some, harmonic, melodic information coming from a guitar, a keyboard, whatever. And then from there, it, maybe like a vocal lands on top, and then, if there's, we're working with the singer too, and then it evolves from there. But sometimes too, a song may start from, say, just like a completely musical idea I bring, like maybe some chords I made in Logic in bed, one night, and then I'll bring that to a session with the singer, and they'll put something down, and we'll kind of build out from there. But, I would say for the most part, like what I've learned is what's important for me is to just go in to making an idea, whether it's making a beat alone or trying to make a full song with someone else, with just no intention but to make music, and however it may come, because I've just found whenever I try and really steer or guide stuff or just put up any kind of boundaries or walls, it just never I don't think like the musical potential is ever realized. I think like for me, my favorite music and the music that's like most exciting to me always, whether it's programmed, whether it's completely live, is stuff that just feels free and human. And the best way to do that for me is just to kind of go in with an open mind, be ready to kind of do stuff any which way. You know, I'm mostly like a computer guy, but but at the same time, I try and be open to like, maybe I'm going to just fiddle around on the Mellotron in the studio. I'm not even going to touch the computer. I'm going to let someone else do that. So just really, if the one way for me to do stuff is just to be open to trying anything and everything.
Tell us about your setup. So you said you like programming drums. I'm guessing you have a bunch of favorite toys. What are you using?
Yeah. Well, it's honestly, it's probably like a lot less interesting than, I don't know, you might hope, but it's basically, I use Logic Pro. I've used that forever since I was like 17. That's kind of my main go-to for starting any kind of idea. Again, like if I'm the one kind of at the helm. So I'll, just kind of build out, like say it's, I mean, a drum loop or whatever could come from the way, like say, I have a pack of like recorded break beats or something, and maybe I'll just chop the hell out of that. I think like the biggest thing I always try to do with stuff is just like make it kind of just weird and different any which way. But, honestly, a lot of stuff for me, it's like starts in Logic and usually like stays there, and maybe other things come in. But so my setup is, I got a Mac Mini, which I really recommend to anyone and everyone, and Apollo, Universal Audio Apollo X8. I have something I've really been liking a lot is the Yamaha Reface CS. That's just kind of, I use that as my MIDI controller, and it's just my kind of like, let's see if we can come up with an inspirational sound, because it's just super easy to work with. I have a little Sony cassette deck, and that's kind of it, to be honest. I mean, I have things that come in and out, but it's really, so much of my workflow previously has been actually just with COVID. I actually bought a desktop, the Mac Mini, for literally the first time in my life. But previously, pre-COVID, I was just a laptop person, and my setup basically was just me, an Apollo Twin, going to friend studios, a super pro studio with like crazy SSL desk and all that, and just kind of my laptop would just be my kind of like whatever bag of or basket of oops, sorry. Oh wait, sorry, did I lose you?
No.
My bad. Yeah, it would just be my like little basket or bag I would just collect everything in, and so whether that's vocals from a session one time, and then, or maybe just messing around on guitar in my friend's living room. Basically, all is to say, I have a pretty simple setup, but it's also, I kind of bend to any circumstance. And so a lot of the time it is really something where, it's, again, like I just have my laptop. That's kind of like my little bag. I just collect, a synth line, put it in, a guitar line from here, vocals from this person, or maybe drums someone else does. So yeah, that's, I mean, basically, I wish I had a more interesting setup for you, but it's basically that. I'm just all mainly computer,
One thing,
but sounds coming from everywhere.
Yeah. Something I noticed in your songs, the tracks you've produced, is like they bring sounds together really well, and they're probably not sounds you'd expect to work together particularly well. But awesome. I guess that's a mark of a good producer, knowing how to take very disparate sources and kind of combine them to create a feeling or a sense that's conveyed through the overall track. So
amazing.
What's your philosophy, I guess, in regards to bringing those sounds together? Do you have like a certain like emotion you're chasing, or is it like, do you think texturally, or are you thinking like very logically, like a clavinet is going to work with this kind of synth bass? Like, is
Right.
it experimental? Like, how much method is there to it?
I think I think for me, it's some intersection of texture and emotion,
Mm.
but generally I, I'm not like a super like classically trained musician or anything. I think I'm like pretty simple minded musically. And I think I can be like hesitant to try and, I kind of like only do what I can like wrap my head around at a certain time. And I think I just gravitate towards simplicity. So I, for me, just like those always like there's a certain like emotion that's always like conveyed through texture. So when something that's like super like low pass kind of filtered like that to me is like maybe a little more moody, and something that's kind of a little more biting and aggressive, like that to me is a bit more, or has the potential to be a bit more like exciting or uplifting. So I think like that's how it's wherever like texture and emotion meet. That's kind of how I try and put stuff together. And then again, going back to the process thing, it often just comes about in a different way. There are certain songs like, for example, Genie with Bon Iver on my album, that was basically just like we threw like so much stuff at, just one idea. And so much of actually forming that song and that production was just going in, muting stuff, deleting, regions here and there, and really just kind of honing in on like what was like the pure, basically just saying like, how little can I get away with, because I think sometimes like so much, like I was saying, you can convey, say, so much emotion in obviously, like say the chords and melody and all that, but also just in the instrument itself. And like a song, I mean, I didn't produce, but wish I did, is this song by my friend Ethan Gruska called Dialing Drunk. And I think an incredible thing about that song is it's very simple just on piano, but even the piano tone itself is like it's like, like he's playing the piano like with the felt up and muted. And I think that just makes it so much more kind of forward facing and like honest on his part. And so, I mean, that's like, I wish I made that, but I didn't. But I think I just kind of go after stuff like that. I'm saying, and how does one sound, I think there's more to a musical part than just like the notes. It's really like the texture. And I think honestly, to some degree, like the texture is as important as the notes. So whenever the texture and emotion like intersect, right, like that's what I'm zeroing in on.
Yeah, that's really cool. So when you go around recording bits and pieces of audio, do you have favorite microphones for different sources?
I mean, for the longest time, like a lot of people, an honest favorite would just be the iPhone memos, voice note memos.
Right.
Whether it's, recording like piano, even recording a vocal. I mean, that's just kind of a thing where what I like about it so much is you always, that because it's like so shitty, you're always, it's like never quite the ideal circumstance. Like it's always capturing like some kind of room sound. It's always, I don't think it's like, it's not like a super like directional mic, like an SM7 or something. It just, there's something about it where it just really captures like the mood and energy of wherever you are. So I think, as I've like gotten a little more like professional in the past year and a half, but I haven't quite used the iPhone mic as much, but that for the longest time like really was, because I just always felt it, it has a way of capturing more than just the literal music itself, but it like can capture the setting and context, like within which the music's being made. But now, I mean, in my studio, I just have an SM7, just any kind of like little vocal ideas, or to go a little more, get something a little more kind of like, cutting and clean, I use a Sound Deluxe U99.
Cool. So in your album, you have some really cool collabs with Bon Iver, as you mentioned, and Kacy Hill, Empress Of, and a few others. So in recording those vocals, do you have kind of approach to producing vocals as well?
A lot of the time it's really, I just kind of make do with what I have. I mean, on the album, probably my favorite, like vocal production I feel like I just really nailed is Note to Self with Empress Of. And that, I just had the privilege of working when we put down those vocals, my friend let me use his studio that day, and he has 1070 Neve 1073 preamp, Tube Tech compressor, and a Sony C80, I believe is the mic. Just basically the most like expensive chain money could buy. But no, I think it really like suited Lorelei, Empress Of. It suited her voice just perfectly. Like, I don't think that's necessarily right for everyone, and I wasn't even necessarily sure in that context, like, oh yeah, this is, the exact vocal chain I want for this. But I think something about that chain just sits with her voice well, because her voice just kind of like floats over everything super well. And I definitely wanted to enhance that. And another thing I did with that is we actually recorded that at like if you use like Verispeed, it's recorded one semitone down. So then when we pitched it back up, like the formant on her voice is like naturally a bit higher. And because it's just one semitone, or no, was it even? No, actually, I don't think it was even. Wait, was it? No, yeah, no, I guess it was. But because of that, and just, it's like, I don't think anyone can like really tell that like her voice is like just barely higher pitched. But I think because it is, with that instrumental in particular, because we tried it a bunch of different ways. We tried her singing it higher, then pitching it down, singing it normal, pitching it like way down, and singing it there and pitching it up. But just this slight one like preserved her voice just perfectly, while also just shaping it in a way where it just cut through everything. Again, like with that vocal chain, the one semitone down, then pitching it back up. That's like, and I didn't even plan for that, honestly. But that is, if I'm proud of like no other vocal production, that's the one I was like, wow, sick. Yeah, I nailed that. Yeah. I could like, it was like a genuine pleasure to like edit those vocals and like, whatever, just because I was so psyched and how the recording came out.
Yeah. That's cool. I don't think I've heard of anyone recording a semitone down and then pitching up later. That's really
yeah.
cool.
I mean, it's definitely, for what it's worth, like it's not for every occasion, because I've done it a ton too, or like tried to like force it sometimes. You're like, this sucks. Like just record it normal,
Yeah.
But everything has its time and its place.
Yeah. And another thing you do really well is use vocals as an instrument. Essentially, it's kind of intelligibility isn't really the goal. It's just kind of, again, it's creating that right feeling.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
How do you go about that? Even just, I think you use auto-tune in some of the tracks, and you kind of sliced and diced in different spots.
Totally. One thing I think I learned from, not even intentionally, but just from Justin Vernon, Bon Iver, and my friend who works with him a lot, how I know him, BJ Burton, is that just kind of more than anything, like feeling is what matters, like you can, it doesn't matter if something like isn't perfectly in tune or isn't perfectly in time, or like the lyric wasn't fully formed. It's just all about feeling. And that's something that I've like really held on to, and so, with that song, for example, Genie, that, Justin put down that vocal. There's definitely not fully formed lyrics there. And when I went back and was like working on the song to really try and like, hone it in and, get it to mixing, all that, I was like, okay, like, let's go in and let's like, make this, Justin really killed it. Let's like make it a little more kind of, a properly produced vocal. And so I like dialed back the auto tune. I, messed with some of the settings on, like BJ had tracked it, and put like, I forget, I mean, whatever, maybe just some like, universal audio or some wave shit on it. But anyways, it as soon as I started doing that, it just started losing like a lot of the feeling, and something about just like the kind of just messing around for fun settings we did in Pro Tools that day really just brought such energy and life to the track that once you started kind of taking away those, those things you did in the room because we did in the room because they felt good, like it started to feel just like less genuine, and so I think that's like, again, kind of going back to what I was talking about, just being open to anything and open-minded, like that very much is another thing. I think sometimes, you have to be open to the fact that like, maybe this vocal is just really good because it feels good, not because it's perfectly pitched and sung or it has the perfect lyrics, but it just feels good. So I just try and embrace that, especially on like, my record being it's like a producer's record. It's not like I'm, the vocalist really trying to hone my lyrical voice and everything.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as mixing goes, do you have any kind of like a specific way of doing things, especially when you're handling so many different sources and trying to maintain clarity and consistency across the different mixes? Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have any like kind of go-to stuff I always do. I mean, one thing I do for sure, is like and then this is usually like in the kind of when the production process, is like kind of wrapping up or I'm moving over towards the mixing process, I really just start to like commit tracks and, like, or in Logic, it's like called bouncing in place. Cause I just like, I'm just someone who I could just tweak stuff to death and I will, you know what I mean? Just like, like I'll listen to something in the car and be like, you know what? Like maybe that distortion plugin could be dialed back like 0.1 degrees or what. I mean, just stuff you would never, ever notice. And so I have to stop myself, just commit stuff and then just kind of, work from there. So I just try and, again, like kind of towards the end of production, like starting to get into mixing phase, I'm just committing stuff and forcing myself to just work from there. Because basically, like when I'm really honing in a mix, like ideally, it of course like never works out this way because I just can't help myself. But I ideally like just want to be messing with the balance, like, volume and EQ and just everything. And then maybe like some, just tweaking the, I usually do some like compression on the master bus and tweaking that. But I basically just try and get everything to a point where all I'm, effects have been committed, like everything's there. All I'm really doing is honing in the EQ and the balance and the like kind of in the mix compression.
Do you have a favorite song from the album? Or I know that's a really tough question. Do you have one that means a lot to you or one that you're particularly proud of?
It's so hard because I just genuinely like love each and every song, and it's so each one is like so important to me. And anytime I listen through, I kind of sometimes like come out liking one more than some of the others. But I don't know. All I could really tell you is I think at different times, different songs like resonate with me a bit more. And I think, I don't know, recently what the one that's been that for me is actually that Empress Of one, Note to Self. I just think the kind of message and energy lyrically is just something that like I always need to hear and tell myself. And, I honestly, at the end of the day, like I like pretty simple stuff, and that song's like pretty simple. It's like really just a synth line on a Moog and some piano on an iPhone, vocal, and like basically the same drum loop throughout. And so that, for me, it just has like some kind of, effect in its simplicity that just like never really gets old. And I hope it doesn't for other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm still blown away that you use an iPhone mic for a lot of the tracks.
I mean, it's one of those things too, where it's like, use an iPhone mic to just capture an idea. And then, then you're like, okay, now let's actually like, whatever, get in the booth and put this down. And then you do, and you're like, I kind of like lost a little soul or something. So I wouldn't say, it's not necessarily always an intention to like, oh, like this has got to be iPhone mic, but it's usually just one of those things that happens in the process of just creating an idea that, it just it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's like, again, like a Sony C80 or whatever. It really, like, you just can't compete with like vibe and energy, no matter how expensive a mic you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, Jimmy. Thanks so much again for hanging out. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find your new album, Ephemera?
My new album, Ephemera, is available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Bandcamp, basically anywhere you can get music in any way, probably on some torrents or Discord. I don't know. Like anywhere and everywhere, I hope. I wanted to just get around to anybody who's willing to listen.
And you can find that by searching Jim E. Stack on any of those platforms. Again, thanks so much, Jimmy. I'm probably going to go listen to more of your music now.
Right on.
Yeah, wish you all the best. And yeah.
Likewise, man. All right, thank you.